The entire club fell into a silence so absolute you could hear the crystal chandeliers trembling. Arcangelo Conti, the retired old lion who'd carved out Rome's criminal empire with blood and cunning, had just committed an unforgivable act. You don't strike a woman in front of your son's men. Not in La Fortezza. Not anywhere. He thought she was nothing. He thought she was invisible. He was catastrophically wrong. Instead of crumpling to the floor, Allied Pinto straightened to her full height and delivered a slap so precise, so thunderous, that it cracked across the vaulted ceiling like divine judgment. The old man stumbled backward, his hand flying to his reddening cheek, disbelief etched into every line of his weathered face. But it wasn't the strike that stopped time. It was what came after. As Simone Conti, the current boss and Arcangelo's son, rose from his chair like a storm given human form, his hand already disappearing beneath his tailored suit jacket toward the Beretta holstered at his ribs, Allied locked eyes with him. No trembling. No apology. No fear. She leaned toward the old man and whispered a single word in Sicilian, a dialect so ancient, so forbidden, that it hadn't been spoken within these walls since the blood wars of the 1970s. Traditore. Betrayer. The breaker of the blood oath. The unforgivable. Simone's hand froze mid-draw. The color drained from the faces of the old guard scattered throughout the room, men who understood what that word meant, what it demanded. In the crystallized heartbeat of silence that followed, everyone in La Fortezza realized the same terrible truth. This wasn't just a clumsy waitress. She was a ghost from a massacre they'd buried, carrying evidence that would either expose them all or detonate the Conti dynasty from within. And outside, in the Rome darkness gathering like a shroud, the Black Sun Syndicate was already cutting the power lines. A ghost from a massacre. A forbidden word that could destroy an empire. And the Black Sun Syndicate closing in like wolves. If you're listening right now, you need to understand something. This isn't just another revenge story. This is about a woman who spent 6 months pretending to be nothing while planning to bring down the man who slaughtered her entire family. My analytics show that 83% of you aren't subscribed yet. But if you want to witness how one whispered word can topple a criminal dynasty, hit that subscribe button right now. Because Allied Pinto is about to show us that sometimes the deadliest vengeance comes not from violence, but from truth. Now, let me take you inside La Fortezza, where secrets go to die. La Fortezza didn't advertise what it was. That was the entire point. From the street, it appeared as just another exclusive social club in Rome's historic center, all Renaissance stonework, wrought iron balconies dripping with bougainvillea, and enough old-world elegance to satisfy every tourist's fantasy of Italian sophistication. Discreet brass plaques. Members only. Move along. But Allied knew better. She'd spent 6 months learning every secret the building held. The Renaissance facade concealed reinforced concrete walls. The elegant windows were fitted with bulletproof glass thick enough to stop a rifle round. The wine cellar had a false back that opened onto an armory stocked with enough firepower to outfit a small militia. Even the marble floors were chosen for their practicality. Carrara marble didn't stain when blood was cleaned quickly. La Fortezza was where Rome's underworld came to conduct business under the illusion of respectability. Territories were negotiated over saltimbocca. Debts were settled alongside bottles of Barolo. Alliances were forged and broken between courses of a 7-course meal. Everyone pretended they were simply successful businessmen enjoying good food and better wine, not predators temporarily filing down their teeth. Allied moved through the dining room like a shadow given substance, her steps soundless on the polished stone, her presence carefully calibrated to be forgotten. She'd perfected the art of erasure over these brutal months. The apologetic hunch of her shoulders. The downcast eyes that never challenged. The nervous smile that made dangerous men look right through her as if she were wallpaper. They saw the black uniform, not the woman inside it. They saw the serving tray, not the rage it concealed. They saw a girl earning €10 an hour, Not the sole survivor of the salt mine massacre, returned from the dead to collect a blood debt 25 years overdue. At the center table, positioned like a throne in the room's geographic heart, sat Arcangelo Conti, holding court like Caesar in winter. Retirement hadn't mellowed his appetite for cruelty, it had merely narrowed his targets. Without an empire to terrorize, he'd turned his venom on smaller prey. Waitstaff, drivers, anyone without the power to strike back. "You call this wine?" Arcangelo's voice carried across the room with deliberate volume, a performance for his audience. He held the glass of Brunello aloft like evidence at a trial, swirling it with theatrical contempt. "This is donkey piss. My grandfather wouldn't have used this to clean his boots." The sommelier stood frozen, face flushed. Around the room, conversations died. Alide watched from her position by the bar, every muscle coiled tight beneath her careful mask of servitude. 6 months. 6 months of bowing her head. 6 months of swallowing rage like poison. Tonight, the mask would finally come off. Tonight, Arcangelo Conti would remember the name he'd tried to erase from history. Tonight, the ghosts of the Pinto family would finally have their reckoning. Tonight, everything changes. Tonight, the mask comes off. If your heart is pounding right now, you understand what's about to happen. This isn't just about revenge, it's about a survivor who's spent 25 years carrying evidence that could destroy everything. The next part of this story will show you how patience can be deadlier than any weapon, how trauma can forge the strongest steel. Make sure you're subscribed, because what Alide does in that dining room will redefine everything you thought you knew about justice. The confrontation that's coming? It's been decades in the making. Alide had learned to disappear long before she came to La Fortezza. It was a survival skill honed in the years after the massacre, when being noticed meant being questioned, and questions led to lies she couldn't maintain. But here, in the heart of Rome's underworld, invisibility had become something more refined, a weapon disguised as weakness. The first month, she'd been genuinely clumsy. Nervous hands. Spilled drinks. A dropped tray that shattered €300 worth of crystal. Arcangelo had screamed himself hoarse while his son watched with cold amusement. They'd docked her pay, threatened to fire her. But they'd kept her on, and that was the point. Clumsy girls didn't get scrutinized. They got dismissed. By the second month, the mistakes became strategic. A wine glass knocked over near the security panel, giving her precious seconds to memorize the 8-digit code as the head of security typed it in, distracted by the spreading red stain on his sleeve. An accidental drop of her notepad behind the bar, where the emergency exit schematic was taped beneath the counter. A stumble into the kitchen that let her photograph the service tunnel's map hanging in the chef's office. She played the fool so convincingly that the men stopped seeing her at all. She became furniture. Background noise. The girl who couldn't walk straight but somehow never got fired because she worked for nothing and complained even less. At night, alone in her rented room above a butcher shop in Trastevere, Alide would spread out her stolen knowledge like a general planning siege. Hand-drawn maps of La Fortezza's 3 floors. Guard rotation schedules copied from the waste bin. Photographs of security cameras and their blind spots. The building's blueprints from 1887, pulled from municipal archives, showing the original wine cellars that connected to the catacombs beneath the city. She memorized every exit, every weakness, every secret the fortress thought it kept. During the day, she shuffled and apologized. Flinched when men raised their voices. Cowered when Arcangelo's cruelty turned her direction. She wore humiliation like armor, and beneath it, she sharpened her understanding of the prison they'd built. Because Alide knew something the Conti family had forgotten, a fortress designed to keep enemies out also kept its owners trapped inside. And when the black sun came, when the doors locked and the lights died, she would be the only one who knew how to navigate the darkness. The hunter, not the hunted. Finally, Arcangelo Conti's cruelty wasn't explosive, it was surgical. He didn't need to raise his voice to eviscerate. Every insult was calculated, delivered with the precision of a man who'd spent 60 years learning exactly where to cut to make it hurt longest. "Look at this one," he announced his table of aging lieutenants, gesturing at the young waiter refilling water glasses. His hands shake like a drunk priest. "Tell me, boy, did your mother drop you, or were you born defective?" The waiter's face flushed crimson. He mumbled something inaudible, nearly fumbling the crystal pitcher. The old men laughed, the hollow, obligatory laughter of men who'd learned long ago that Arcangelo's jokes demanded participation. Simone sat at his father's right hand, silent. He'd stopped intervening years ago. What was the point? The old lion needed his prey. Retirement had stripped him of empires to conquer, rivals to crush, territories to claim. So he hunted smaller game. The powerless. The voiceless. Those who couldn't strike back without losing everything. Allied watched from her station by the kitchen doors, a tray balanced on her hip. She'd seen this theater before. Arcangelo performed his cruelty the way other men played cards, casually, frequently, with the bored expertise of someone who'd mastered the game decades ago. And Arcangelo turned his attention to the sommelier, still hovering nervously with the rejected Brunello. "Where did Simone find you? A dumpster behind Termini Station? This wine tastes like you filtered it through your sock." The sommelier's jaw clenched. His career had been built on discretion, on serving Rome's elite without complaint. But everyone had limits. "Signore, this is a 2015 Biondi Santi. It's been rated." "I don't care if the Pope blessed it personally," Arcangelo cut him off, waving his hand like shooing a fly. "It's swill. Replace it or get out of my sight." This was Arcangelo's kingdom now, not the streets of Rome, not the politicians in his pocket, not the empire he'd built brick by bloody brick. Just this room. These moments. The small, bitter satisfactions of humiliating people who couldn't fight back. He believed he was untouchable. Protected by his son's position, by his legacy, by the decades of fear his name still commanded. He believed his secrets were buried deep enough that no one would ever dig them up. He believed the salt mine massacre was ancient history, forgotten by everyone except historians and conspiracy theorists. He was wrong on all counts. And tonight, the past he'd buried would rise up wearing a waitress uniform and speaking in the old tongue. Allied had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Every variable calculated. Every reaction predicted. The falling tray was choreography disguised as catastrophe. She moved between tables carrying the evening's most expensive bottle, a 1947 Chateau d'Yquem that Simone had ordered for a visiting dignitary. For €1,000 of liquid gold balanced on a silver tray. The kind of mistake that couldn't be forgiven. As she passed Arcangelo's table, she let her foot catch, just barely, on the leg of his chair. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to seem inevitable, the natural conclusion of 6 months of documented clumsiness. The tray tilted. Time crystallized. The bottle slid in elegant slow motion, toppling toward the marble floor. Allied let it fall. Let the crash reverberate through the room like a gunshot. Let the priceless sauternes explode across the stone in a spreading amber lake that looked almost like blood in the candlelight. The room went silent. "You stupid," Arcangelo was on his feet before the echo faded, his face purple with rage. "Do you have any idea what that cost? Are you completely useless?" Allied dropped to her knees, reaching for the shattered glass with trembling hands, the performance of panic she'd perfected. "I'm so sorry, signore, I didn't mean." "Sorry." Arcangelo's hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. He yanked her upward, bringing her face close to his. His breath reeked of cigars and contempt. "Sorry doesn't pay for what you just destroyed, you clumsy little." Then he struck her. An open-handed slap across the face that snapped her head sideways and sent a sharp crack echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The room held its breath. This was the line. The sacred boundary that even men like Arcangelo understood. You could humiliate the staff. Mock them. Work them until they broke. But you didn't hit them. Not in front of witnesses. Not in La Forteza, where the illusion of civilization was the only thing separating them from animals. Simone stood slowly, his chair scraping against stone. Papa, but Alide was already straightening, already letting the mask slip, already meeting Arcangelo's eyes with something he hadn't seen in decades, a gaze that held no fear, no submission, only recognition. She touched her reddening cheek almost tenderly, as if confirming something she'd suspected all along. Then she smiled, not the apologetic grimace of a waitress, but the cold satisfaction of a hunter finally springing the trap. "Thank you," she whispered in perfect Sicilian. "I've been waiting for you to give me permission." Then she slapped him back. The sound of Alide's slap was louder than Arcangelo's had been. Sharper. More deliberate. The old lion stumbled backward, shock painted across his weathered face in shades of disbelief and rage. Around the room, men half rose from their seats, hands instinctively moving toward weapons they shouldn't need in a place like this. Simone's beretta was already clearing his jacket when Alide leaned forward, her lips nearly touching Arcangelo's ear, and whispered the word that stopped everything. Traditore. The effect was instantaneous. Simone's hand froze mid-draw. The old-timers scattered throughout the room went rigid, their faces draining of color. One of them, a white-haired consigliere who'd served 3 generations of Contis, actually crossed himself. "Madonna Santa," someone breathed. Arcangelo's eyes went wide. Not with anger now. With something worse. Recognition. Fear. Traditore. The ancient Sicilian curse reserved for the unforgivable, those who'd broken the blood oath, who'd sold their own famiglia to enemies, who'd traded lives for profit or safety or revenge. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a formal charge that, in the old country, in the old days, demanded immediate resolution. A trial by confession or a trial by blood. The word hadn't been spoken in Rome since 1976, when the Calabrian families had torn themselves apart in a purge that left entire bloodlines erased from history. After that, the Commission had forbidden its use. Too dangerous. Too absolute. Once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. It demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded that old wounds be reopened and examined under unforgiving light. Alide straightened, her voice carrying now clear and cold and precise. Still in Sicilian, the dialect of judgment. Traditore you sangue di Pinto. Betrayer of Pinto blood. The room erupted in whispers. Men looked at each other with dawning comprehension. Pinto. The salt mine massacre. 1999. The family that had been wiped out in a single night, men, women, even children slaughtered in the abandoned mines outside Palermo, where they'd been hiding from a rival clan. Everyone had assumed it was betrayal. Someone had sold their location. But the Pintos had died to the last, taking the secret of who'd betrayed them into the grave. Except they hadn't all died. Simone's gun was still half drawn, but his eyes were on Alide now, really seeing her for the first time. Searching her face for something he suddenly, desperately needed to find. The first explosion came before anyone could speak. Not inside, outside, at the front gates. A thunderous crack followed by the shriek of twisting metal and the crystalline shower of bulletproof glass finally finding its breaking point. The lights died instantly. Emergency power should have kicked in within seconds, bathing the club in red emergency lighting. It didn't. Someone had cut the backup generators. Darkness swallowed La Forteza whole. Chaos erupted immediately. Chairs scraped. Men shouted. Someone fired a gun at shadows, the muzzle flash illuminating panicked faces for a fraction of a second before plunging them back into blackness. The shot went wild, punching into a Renaissance fresco worth more than most men earned in a lifetime. Calma. Simone's voice cut through the pandemonium. Everyone stay. The second explosion drowned him out. Closer this time. The kitchen entrance, if Alide's mental map was correct. She could hear the roar of flames catching on cooking oil, the scream of someone who'd been too close when the charge went off. Black Sun, someone shouted. It's the Maledetti Black Sun, the rival syndicate. The Serbs who'd been pushing into Connie territory for months, testing boundaries, probing for weakness. Tonight they'd found it, or created it. Either way, La Fortezza was under siege. Men stumbled in the darkness, crashing into tables, into each other. Some headed for the main doors. Others scrambled toward the panic room in the basement. The organization that had seemed so disciplined in daylight dissolved into frightened animals fleeing fire. But Alide didn't move. She stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, her eyes already adjusting to the darkness that 6 months of memorization had prepared her for. She knew exactly where she was. Exactly where the pillars stood. Exactly where the emergency exits hid behind their Renaissance disguises. She could hear boots on the stairs now, multiple teams, moving with military precision. The Black Sun weren't just attacking. They were clearing the building floor by floor, driving everyone toward the basement like sheep into a pen. A hand grabbed her arm in the darkness. Simone. She recognized his cologne, his grip. You, he hissed. You knew this was coming. No, Alide said calmly, truthfully. But I know how to survive it. The question is, do you want to live long enough to hear what your father did? Another explosion. Closer still. The chandeliers crashed down somewhere in the darkness, crystal shattering like rainfall. Follow me, Alide said. Or die here like everyone else. The panic room was smaller than its name suggested, 12 feet by 12 feet of reinforced concrete buried in the building's foundation. Steel door thick enough to stop an anti-tank missile. Air filtration. Emergency supplies. Communications equipment currently useless because whoever had planned the siege had jammed every frequency. 3 people breathing the same recycled air. 3 people who, an hour ago, had occupied completely different universes. Simone sat against one wall, his Beretta resting on his knee, pointed casually at nothing and everything. Arcangelo slumped in the corner, his earlier arrogance collapsed into something smaller, more desperate. And Alide stood by the door, listening to the muffled sounds of the fortress being systematically dismantled above them. Gunfire. Shouting. The crackle of flames finding new fuel. They'll breach the armory in 10 minutes, Alide said conversationally. After that, they'll have enough firepower to cut through this door in 20. Maybe less. Simone's eyes never left her face. How do you know their timing? I don't. But I know the building. I know what they need to reach to kill us. She turned from the door, meeting his gaze directly. The same way I know there's a service tunnel behind that ventilation grate. Leads to the catacombs. From there, the city. We could be gone before they reach this level. Then why are we still here? Simone asked. Because I need him, she pointed at Arcangelo, to tell you what he did before we leave. Before I let any of us leave. Arcangelo finally looked up, and there was something broken in his eyes now. The old lion reduced to an old man. I don't know what you're talking about. Bugiardo. Liar. Alide's voice was ice. May 14th, 1999. The Salt Mine Massacre. 23 members of the Pinto Famiglia. You gave the Calabrians their location for 3 million euros and a promise they'd stay out of Rome. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the sounds of battle above seemed to fade. Simone rose slowly. Papa. She's lying, Arcangelo whispered, but there was no conviction in it. Alide reached into her uniform pocket, moving slowly so Simone wouldn't shoot, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old. Yellowed. Creased from 25 years of careful preservation. Bank transfer records, she said. 3 million deposited into your Zurich account. May 15th, 1999. One day after my family died screaming in the dark. She let the paper fall at Simone's feet. Your hero is a traditore. And I'm the ghost he created. Alide's voice dropped to something quieter than the chaos above, but infinitely more terrible. I was 7 years old. Small enough to hide in spaces adults couldn't reach. That's the only reason I'm standing here. Simone picked up the bank record with hands that weren't quite steady. His eyes scanned the numbers, the dates, the account holder's name coded but recognizable to anyone who knew his father's patterns. The Calabrians were hunting us, Allied continued. Blood feud. My grandfather had killed one of theirs over a shipment dispute. Old world justice. Entire bloodlines pay for individual sins. We knew they were coming, so we ran. Hid in the abandoned salt mines outside Palermo, where my uncle used to work. She closed her eyes, but she wasn't seeing the panic room anymore. She was seeing tunnels. Darkness. The salt-stained walls that had witnessed the end of everything. 23 of us in those mines. The Calabrians didn't know the location. Couldn't know, only 5 people in the world knew where we'd gone. My father. My uncle. 2 cousins. Her eyes opened, fixing on Arcangelo with laser precision. And the man who'd sold us the safe house in the first place. The man who promised protection if we needed to disappear. The man who took payment from both sides. Arcangelo's face had gone gray. I didn't know they'd kill children. Silenzio. The command ripped from Simone's throat. He stared at his father as if seeing a stranger. Let her finish. They came at night, Allied said. Blocked the entrance. Pumped something into the tunnels. Gas, maybe smoke, I never knew. People started choking. Screaming. My mother shoved me into a service shaft, a ventilation tunnel too narrow for adults. Told me not to make a sound no matter what I heard. Her voice didn't break. It had broken years ago, then calcified into something harder. I listened to my family die for 3 hours. Listened to them beg. Listened to the Calabrians execute the survivors one by one. When it was quiet, I crawled through a kilometer of tunnel on my hands and knees, 7 years old, covered in their blood. She pulled a second document from her pocket. A ledger page, photographed. Your father's handwriting. The address. The entry codes. Payment received. 3 million euros to betray women and children to butchers. I've carried these documents for 16 years, Allied whispered. Waiting to be old enough. Strong enough. Close enough. She looked at Arcangelo. Now tell your son I'm lying. Simone stared at the documents in his hands as if they were artifacts from an alien world. Numbers. Dates. His father's distinctive angular script. The evidence wasn't circumstantial. It was absolute. Damning. Undeniable. Above them, an explosion rocked the foundation. Dust sifted from the ceiling. They had minutes, maybe less. Say something, Arcangelo pleaded, and the old lion's voice cracked like thin ice. Simone, you have to understand, it was business. Just business. The Calabrians would have found them eventually anyway. Children. Simone's voice was flat. Dead. You sold children. I didn't know. You knew. Allied cut through the lie like a blade. You knew exactly what they'd do. That's why they paid so much. Not for information. For silence. For complicity. For a man willing to trade innocence for profit. Simone looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw someone he'd never seen before. Or perhaps someone he'd always seen but never allowed himself to acknowledge. The cruelty in the restaurant. The casual violence toward the powerless. The venom he directed at anyone who couldn't strike back. This was who Arcangelo Conti had always been. Simone had just been too devoted to the myth to see the man. 30 years, Simone said quietly. I've spent 30 years building on your foundation. Your legacy. Your honor. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And it was all built on the graves of children. Another explosion. Closer. The lights flickered even though they were on emergency power. We need to move, Allied said. Now. The tunnel or the grave, choose. Simone raised his gun. For a long moment, no one breathed. The Beretta could point at Allied, the ghost who'd destroyed his world. Or at Arcangelo, the father who'd poisoned everything Simone had built. The barrel settled on Arcangelo. No, the old man whispered. Figlio mio. I'm not your son anymore. Simone's hand didn't shake. A son of a traditore is nothing. You made me nothing. He lowered the gun, and somehow that was worse than firing it. Get out. Both of you. Take the tunnel. And you? Allied asked. Someone needs to seal it behind you. Make sure the black sun doesn't follow. Simone's smile was terrible. Besides, maybe I deserve to burn with him. Then we all burn, Allied said, kneeling by the ventilation grate. Or we all leave. Your empire is dead either way. The question is whether you want to build something honest from the ashes. She pulled the grate free. Beyond it, darkness yawned. The catacombs beneath Rome were older than memory, carved by hands that had turned to dust millennia ago. Allied moved through them like she'd been born in darkness, her memorized map guiding them through passages that hadn't seen daylight since the Empire fell. Behind them, La Fortezza died loudly. Explosions. Gunfire. The roar of flames consuming everything the Conti family had built. Simone had sealed the tunnel entrance after pushing his father through, then disappeared back into the smoke. Whether to fight or to finish what honor demanded, Allied didn't know. Didn't ask. Some choices a man had to make alone. Arcangelo stumbled ahead of her, old and broken, his expensive suit covered in dust and shame. He'd stopped protesting somewhere in the third tunnel. Stopped making excuses. The old lion had finally accepted what he was, what he'd always been. Just a coward who'd outlived his usefulness. They emerged in a construction site near the Colosseum, the Roman dawn painting the ancient stones in shades of rose and gold. Police sirens wailed in the distance, converging on the carnage in the historic center. Fire trucks. Ambulances. The machinery of aftermath. Allied stripped off her waitress apron, the black fabric stained with dust and blood that wasn't hers. She folded it carefully, deliberately, and left it on a pile of rubble. A ghost shedding its disguise. A role finally finished. What now? Arcangelo asked, his voice hollow. You've destroyed everything. Exposed me. Killed my son's empire. Was it enough? Does it bring them back? Allied turned to face him one last time. The morning light caught her face, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 7-year-old girl who'd crawled out of the salt mines covered in her family's blood. No, she said simply. Nothing brings them back. But they're not screaming in my head anymore. For the first time in 25 years, it's quiet. She pulled a phone from her pocket, not her own, one of the disposable cells she'd prepared months ago. She dialed a number from memory. When it connected, she spoke clearly, via Della Madonna dei Monti. Construction site. You'll find Arcangelo Conti. The Carabinieri will want to hear what he has to say about 1999. She hung up before they could respond. Arcangelo's eyes widened. You're leaving me for them? I'm leaving you to justice. Something you never gave my family. Allied walked away without looking back, disappearing into the Roman morning crowds. Just another young woman in a white shirt and black pants, anonymous and unremarkable. The ghost of the Pinto family had finally found peace. And Allied could finally start learning who she was beyond vengeance. What an absolutely breathtaking journey we've just experienced together. Allied went from a 7-year-old hiding in the darkness to a woman who brought light to the darkest secret. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of survival, justice, and the kind of revenge that comes from truth rather than violence. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And I have to ask, what hit you hardest? The revelation in the panic room? The escape through the catacombs? Or that final moment of letting go? Comment below and let's discuss. Your engagement means everything to this channel. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.